Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order, and clerk, what's your name, sir? Eric. Eric, can you please open the roll, please? Okay, looks like we have a quorum, and what I'd like to do, and I know we've got a lot of people here that are going to be waiting on the certain of the reports, and so what I'm going to get to first is the Companion Animal Subcommittee, or as I like to colloquially call it, the Dogs and Cats Committee. And, well, okay. And so I'm going to call on the chair of that subcommittee, Senator Marsden, to go ahead with your report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have some bills that the committee has dealt with in the two meetings that we held. The first bill up is Senate Bill 87. This prohibits a dealer or commercial dog or cat breeder from importing for sale, selling, or offering for sale a dog or cat bred by a person who has received certain citations pursuant to the Federal Animal Welfare Control Act. Currently, law only prohibits such activities related to the sale of dogs. The bill also clarifies that selling includes selling the dog or cat for experimental purposes. And I believe an amendment not considered in the subcommittee is necessary to ensure that the bill applies to entities that breed animals for research and not just commercial breeders. So, Lisa, could you report the staff amendment that of a technical nature?
Yes, sir. On the, we would add a new subsection. Hold on. Let me get caught up with you 1 second.
Okay, the bill number is, just for you guys out, Senate Bill 87.
Mr. Chairman, I've prepared a substitute that would include both the reenactment clause recommended by the subcommittee as well as a new subsection D, which the subcommittee did not consider, that would say, as used in this section, dealer and commercial dog or cat breeder includes any person or entity that breeds dogs or cats regulated under federal law as research animals. Without this amendment, I don't think that the bill would capture the community that it is hoping to capture.
Okay, can you speak to that? Yes.
And yes,
Senator
I think
Marsden.
that's a good amendment, and I so move that the amendment be adopted.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second to adopt that amendment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Okay, the amendment is adopted.
Thank you. On a 3-0 vote, Mr. Chairman, the bill as amended was recommended 3-0 with a reenactment clause, and I so move.
Okay, so the bill has been recommended with the reenactment clause. We have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. Motion and a second to vote the bill. Clerk, Eric, please open the roll. Okay.
Ayes 9, no 0.
Next bill, which is, what do you got next?
Senate Bill 88.
88.
All right, Senate Bill 88 requires entities that breed dogs or cats for sale or transfer to an animal testing facility to keep records of each animal for 2 years from the date of the sale or transfer, and to annually submit a summary of the records to the state veterinarian. And the subcommittee reported this 3-0, and so that I move that the bill pass.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, or do we have a second? Second. I have a motion and a second for this bill to pass. We had comment in the subcommittee, so I'm not going to ask for comment. Any of the members want to have any comment? Feel free to say no. Okay. All right. We have a motion and a second for the bill to pass. Clerk, please open the roll.
Ayes 10, no 0.
Okay, ayes 10, no 0. Bill passes. Next bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 89. Senate Bill 89 prohibits a pet shop from selling a dog or cat unless it has been first spayed or neutered. A violation is a Class 3 misdemeanor. The bill comes to you with a 1-to-1 vote, and I've spoken with the patron, and what we would like to do is carry this bill over for a year for reconsideration in the next session. There's some disagreement with folks as to when this spaying and neutering can take place, and I think we need some time to sort that out. So I would move that the bill be carried over for the year.
I've got a motion and a second for the bill to be carried over. Senate Bill 89. Clerk, please open the roll.
Ayes 10, no 0.
Okay, ayes 10, no zero. The bill is carried over. Next bill.
No, yes, thank you. Senate Bill 90 is my next offering here, Mr. Chairman. It requires a breeder of dogs and cats for sale or transfer to an animal testing facility that no longer has a need for a dog or cat in its possession to offer the animal for adoption prior to euthanizing it. Currently, only animal testing facilities are subject to this requirement. It comes to you with a 3-0 recommendation to report, and I so move.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to adopt Senate Bill 90. Clerk, please open the roll.
Ayes 10, no zero.
Ayes 10, no zero. The bill passes. Next bill.
Next bill, we have Senate Bill 279, brought from outside the committee by Senator DeSteph. Deals with vicious dogs, authorizes a law enforcement officer or animal control officer to apply to a magistrate for a summons for a vicious dog if such officer is located in either the jurisdiction where the vicious dog resides or in the jurisdiction where the vicious dog committed one of the acts set forth in the definition. The bill also requires any evidentiary hearing or appeal to be held not less than 30 days from the date of the summons or appeal unless good cause is found by the court. We adopted a line amendment, and if I could ask that Lisa report the line amendment to this bill.
Mr. Chairman, on line 29, strike may and insert shall.
Okay, I have a motion to take the word may and replace it with shall. Did I state that correct? I have
So moved.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, the amendment passes.
All right, the bill is before us as amended on a 2-0 vote to report, and I so move.
All right, we have a motion and a second to report the bill as amended. Clerk, please open the roll.
Ayes 10, no zero.
Okay, ayes 10, no zero. The bill passes. Next bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 442 is brought to you by Senator Boysko. Requires any person who or entity that breeds dogs and cats for animal testing facilities to report certain to the state veterinarian on a monthly basis. The report shall include information regarding the birth, acquisition, death, sale, transfer, or other disposition of a dog or cat in the prior month. The subcommittee recommends this with a 3-0 vote, and I move that the bill report.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second to report the bill. This is Senate Bill 442. Clerk, please open the roll. Okay.
Ayes 12, no zero.
Okay, we have a vote of ayes 12, no zero. The bill reports. Next bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 457, also brought by Senator Boysko, prohibits a person from breeding or raising a dog for the purpose of selling or transferring the dog or cat or its offspring to an animal research facility outside of the United States or to an animal research facility located in the United States that will use the animal for testing or research not required by federal law or regulation. We amended the bill to strike the criminal penalty because originally it had been reported as being a Class 1 misdemeanor. And we also amended the bill to make the bill applicable only after a critical citation after July 1st, 2023. It also amendment required that if citation occurs, dogs or cats should be offered for adoption. We have added a reenactment clause to this bill, so I would move those amendments.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to adopt the amendments. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the amendments are adopted. Okay, so we have the
Thanks so
bill in
much.
front of us as amended, and it's only like a sentence long, so.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Senator Hanger.
thank you. Could you remind me who's on the subcommittee?
That would be myself, Senator Favola, who is our our deputy chair, and committee whip is Senator Hackworth.
Okay, it's
Okay, all right.
highly select. No, you cannot join, okay? All right, all right. Come see me if you want to apply. Okay. So we have Senate Bill 457 in front of us as amended. Do I have a motion on the underlying bill?
So I move to report.
Okay, I have a motion to report the bill as amended. Clerk, open the roll.
Ayes 12, noes 1.
Ayes 12, noes 1. All right, ayes 12, noes 1. That bill reports. What do we have left?
We have two
Okay.
additional, actually three matters left, Mr. Chairman. The first, Senate Bill 535, which is my bill, and this directs the state veterinarian to hire an animal welfare oversight officer to inspect and oversee the operations of research breeders defined in the bill as a person or entity that breeds dogs or cats for sale or transfer for use in testing or research within or outside the Commonwealth, and report any violations of state or federal law by the research breeder. The bill requires each research breeder to register with the Animal Welfare Oversight Officer, pay a registration fee as determined by the Commissioner of Agriculture and Consumer Resources, which, Mr. Chairman, I would add would fully pay for through a non-general fund appropriation, fully pay for this animal oversight officer, and allow the animal oversight officer continuous access to its facilities located in the Commonwealth. The bill subjects a research breeder that does not register, pay the fee, or allow the animal welfare oversight officer access to its facilities to a civil penalty of $1,000 for each day of noncompliance. The bill also establishes an animal welfare oversight advisory committee, which would consist of a member or an appointee of the Humane Society, a veterinarian, 2 citizens, and it will be overseen by the state veterinarian. And the bill is recommended to be reported 3-0, and I so move.
This needs to go to finance? Okay, let me just, I'm going to sort of slow down the train here and ask us, research breeders, can you give me examples of research breeders, please? What are we talking about?
Well, what we're talking about here primarily is the Envigo facility in Cumberland County,
Okay, all
Maryland,
right.
who has some, I guess, somewhere just south of 4,000 dogs at this very moment, who sell them for research and, including to veterinary schools for teaching them how to
Okay.
examine dogs, do teeth, and for others for medical research.
That's what I needed to know. Okay, any other questions from the panel? All right, Eric, please open the roll.
Ayes 12, noes 0, 1 abstention.
Okay. Okay, Senate Bill 535 reports. What else do we have left?
I have two more. Senate Bill 604 from Senator Stanley clarifies that dogs and cats in the possession of a person who or an entity that breeds dogs and cats for sale or transfer to an animal research facility are considered companion animals for the purpose of animal cruelty statutes. The bill also provides that breeding dogs or cats for sale or transfer to a research facility or breeding dogs or cats within a research facility does not constitute bona fide scientific or medical experimentation for purposes of animal cruelty statutes. We have added a reenactment clause, so that is an amendment to the bill, and so I so move the reenactment clause amendment.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to add the reenactment clause to SB 604. All in favor, say aye.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
if the train can slow down just a little bit
it
more.
is slowed. Wait,
May I ask the Senator Marsden a question?
go ahead.
With regard to the reenactment clause, why are we adding reenactment clauses onto all of these bills if we believe that the legislation is appropriate to protect animals? Why a reenactment clause? Which I noticed were on, I think, 6 of the 7 bills.
I think 3, had reenactment clauses. Senator Morrissey, the issue here is that these reenactments will come in very handy if the oversight officer comes back and reports things to the Senate Ag and House Ag committee members, or chairman, VDACs and the advisory committee, and that we may need to stop the operations at those facilities. These bills will then come in very handy, but right now they're a little contraindicated based on the oversight officer bill that we just passed. So they're being held in reserve.
Follow-up question.
Go ahead.
Is there any possibility by voting in favor of the amendment for the reenactment clause that we will do anything to hinder the safety and welfare of these animals?
No, sir. The animal oversight officer is going to take care of hopefully these issues. And as a physician who testified in front of the subcommittee stated, it's one of the first times that this stuff has been these issues have been brought directly to the people. In other words, this comes directly back to the legislature to make these determinations, not waiting for regulatory processes to take place, and so that we can act quickly next year if this particular facility, does not come up to our standards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And just for the audience, a reenactment clause basically means the law won't take effect unless it's reenacted. So basically, it sends a message, but by the same token, it won't be binding law until we reenactment. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, one further matter.
Yes, Senator Marston.
That I'm calling Senate Joint Resolution 101, similar to 101 Dalmatians.
We need to vote on 604.
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry.
Okay, slow down. Okay, so Senate Bill 604, we need to report as amended and go to finance. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, a motion and a second to report as amended and refer to finance. Eric, please open the roll.
Ayes 13, no 0.
Oh, my gosh. Okay, ayes 13, no 0. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. SJR 101 is a committee-generated bill, a resolution that is placing Senator Stanley on doggy probation for 2 years. It's non-appealable, and I so move.
All right.
I second.
All right. I'm going to take that as
An attempt at humor.
a
There you go.
jocular remark. All right. Okay. Let me clean out our, thank you, Senator Marsden. And by the way, all these bills were heard in subcommittee, so don't think that we're kind of gliding over these issues. They were actually heard in depth. And by the way, don't worry, we are going to defeat some bills today, so don't worry about that. Well, there we go. Okay, Senator McClellan, why don't you go ahead and present your legislation?
Yes, I'm going to start with Senate Bill 654. The issue this bill was trying to deal with is if you have a permit holder who's been required to purchase credits from a mitigation bank for impacts to streams and wetlands, there are no credits available in the locality where the site is, or they're too expensive, that permit holder could purchase the credits from the locality. My understanding is DEQ is studying this issue right now, and so.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Yeah.
Thanks.
My understanding is DEQ is studying this issue right now, and so I would like to have this Senate Bill 654 carried over with a letter to DEQ to study the contents of this bill and what they're already looking at.
Okay, so we're going to, this is Senate Bill 654, dealing with wetland and stream mitigation banks, and we're going to carry this over so DEQ can take a look, and I know that the Executive Director of DEQ is here, and we'll be happy to work with Senator McClellan. So we have a motion and a second to carry that bill over, 654. Clerk, open the roll.
Ayes 13, no 0.
Ayes 13, no 0. The bill is carried over.
All right. The next one is Senate Bill 489. Again, I'm going to ask this be carried over with a letter, but first, what this bill was intending to do was try to ensure that a good portion of the grants given from the Water Quality Improvement Fund and the Department of Environmental, the Water Quality Improvement Fund and the Stormwater Local Assistance Funds were given to projects in localities that are at or above fiscal stress. There are all kinds of issues that have arisen with this, and so I'm going to ask that this be carried over with a letter to DEQ and DCR to develop a working group to consider how to feasibly address that issue. Lisa has the language of what that letter would say, because we were going to try to do it in a substitute, but rather than putting it in the code, we figured it was better to just do it by letter.
Okay, so we've got a motion. I think we'll say that it's a motion to pass by with a letter, and the letter will be to DEQ, Senator?
It'd be to DEQ and DCR.
Okay, so if staff could draft a letter to DEQ and DCR, we will pass by indefinitely Senate Bill 439. Can I entertain a motion? Oh,
Continue the bill.
continue. Yes, Martha, did you have a comment?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, but since we weren't privy to that letter, we would want to make sure that the agriculture community was included in that 100% moves forward.
Okay, that's a reasonable request. Okay. All right, so we have a motion to, is it continue? What's the motion?
Carry over.
We have a motion to carry over with a letter. Okay, I have a motion and a second to carry this bill over, Senate Bill 489 with a letter. Clerk, open the roll. Okay, that bill is carried over unanimously. What do we got next? Okay, I've got some out-of-committee senators who are present. Senator Kiggins, I see you trying to make eye contact with me. I'm going to take that as you want to have your bill reported. Okay. How bipartisan? All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. This is Senate Bill 569, and there is a substitute.
Okay, please pass out the substitute. Could I have a motion to adopt the substitute? Okay, there's a motion and a second to adopt the substitute. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the substitute is adopted. Let's all get copies here. And while we're getting the copies, you want to go ahead and start your presentation.
Sure. Senate Bill 569, it creates the Virginia Resiliency Authority, which is a single state entity to develop, manage, and integrate restoration and resilience. It also implements the Resiliency Master Plan. This is important because we need to have a single state entity which will allow Virginia the ability to draw federal dollars for resiliency efforts. They'll work directly with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the Department of Defense for flood support near bases. It will allow Virginia to draw extra federal dollars, especially after disasters, because it will set up a one-point person to work with FEMA. This was modeled after Louisiana's Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, which was put in place after Hurricane Katrina. In the bill, you'll see it establishes a 17-person board of directors, which is listed in the substitute. And of note, there's no less than 25% of the money dispersed from the Community Flood Preparedness Fund that shall be used for projects in low-income geographic areas, so no less than 25% of that will go to those areas. And I know that we have representative of the administration here to speak in support and to answer any questions, but I ask that you pass Senate Bill 569.
Okay, let's start with this question. How is the substitute different than the introduced bill?
So the original bill, one of the ways is that the word coastal was taken out. There was some concern that it was just dealing with coastal regions of Virginia, but now it impacts really any waterfront land. So waterways, lakes, rivers, areas impacted by flooding. So it takes out that coastal piece. More inclusive now.
Okay, so if it's not coastal Virginia resiliency, is this just kind of
Resiliency in general.
resiliency in general? But I think it's okay. All right. Do I have any questions from the panel for Senator Kiggins, and then we'll bring up witnesses? Hold on. Okay, we got a problem here, Houston. Okay. Yeah, I don't have a computer with me, so I'm gonna. All right, I actually. All right, let's do this. Okay, so the substitute takes out the word coastal. Okay, I feel like I'm doing this a little bit flying blind. Okay, why don't we bring up some witnesses? Who do we have? Mr. Wheeler, come on up. It's not online? All right, why don't we do this? And I hate to do this, but can we move it to the back of the, let's take it, we need to have access to the text.
It's okay.
Okay. All right, why don't we do this? Let's move on to a different bill, okay? And
We can come back, That's that's fine.
Yeah, okay, we're going to move on to another bill.
It's up to you. Okay.
about 12 pieces of legislation in 4 minutes. Okay, do we have, to step, we've already covered your bill. Okay, what? Okay, do we have a motion on Senator Cosgrove's bill? What's the number?
773.
Okay, we've got a motion on Senate Bill 773, that's to carry it over for the year. Okay, it's a motion to carry 773 over the year. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
It's a written vote.
Okay, why don't we do this? Let's take about a 5-minute break, okay? We've been moving too quickly, and that's the chair's fault. Why don't we take about a 5-minute break, okay? And we'll be back on in 5 minutes, okay? All right.
I think it was,
Recess is over. Thank you so much, and we are now passing out. I think we're back on, which bill are we on? Higgins. Okay, we now have the correct, we have the substitute for Senate Bill 569. And everyone, please take their seats. And just, this is a moment, I want to recognize our staff. I can't tell you how much they're doing right now, and this committee and finance, and so. Okay, all right. All right, so Senator Kiggins, you're right back. Why don't we kind of start all over again and just tell us about the
Yeah,
bill? And then let me get a motion to adopt the substitute. Okay, motion is second to adopt the substitute right here. All in favor, say aye. Aye. And Senator Kiggins, just tell us what the bill does and then how
Yeah.
the substitute makes it better.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Senate Bill 569. So I think we talked a little bit about the substitute, but basically this bill creates the Virginia Resiliency Authority. So it's not the Coastal Resiliency Authority. It's really all kinds of resiliency. And the important thing about this bill is that it creates just a single state entity that's there to now communicate with federal level people so that we are now eligible for federal level funding in dollars. This is important and modeled after kind of what happened in Louisiana with the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority they put in place after Katrina. It works out better if we have one point person that can work with FEMA and draw down those extra federal dollars. It's going to work directly with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and Department of Defense for flood support near bases. There's a board, so this single point entity is actually comprised of a 17-person board of directors, which is listed in the substitute. And then there's, I think I mentioned briefly just about, there's some focus on low-income geographic areas which are maybe underrepresented. So we did address that as well. But I'd really like to hear from Secretary Wheeler, if he doesn't mind coming up and just giving some of his insight as to the
Okay.
need for the bill.
All right, Mr. Wheeler, come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the patron for going forward with this bill. On behalf of the governor and myself, we support this legislation. We think it's very important going forward. It's one of the administration's highest priorities on the resiliency across the entire state, not just the coastal regions, but the entire state. As the patron mentioned, this is modeled after the successful Louisiana Coastal Protection Resiliency Authority after Katrina. At that point in time, I was the staff director and chief counsel on the Senate Environment Public Works Committee for the U.S. Senate. And Louisiana had I'm going to put this delicately, I assume there's nobody here from Louisiana, a long history of spending a lot of money but not really getting to a point to be well prepared for Katrina. I think that was
Okay.
diplomatic.
Okay.
After this was created in the state, they did a much better job of working with the federal government. They had one point of contact for the entire state to marshal the federal resources and then to make sure that they were spent appropriately on resiliency issues and projects across the state. So it ended up being very successful over the last 20 years in Louisiana.
All right, let me ask a couple questions. I'll entertain questions from the committee. First of all, the funding for this, is it general fund? Is it federal funds? Is it money coming through the RGGI program? What are we talking about?
It's general funds, $2.5 million, but we think the cost savings, when you take a look at the additional federal funding, we believe that this authority will be able to tap into and better spend, that there will be a lot of cost savings for the entire Commonwealth.
Okay, other questions from the panel?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Lewis.
just a couple for Mr. Wheeler. So does this latest iteration of the bill, Mr. Wheeler, take in the Community Flood Preparedness Fund?
I'm sorry, take into
Does it take
account.
in the Community Flood Preparedness Fund into the authority?
I'm not sure. I'd have to get,
Okay.
I'll get a quick answer.
Senator
for you
Lewis,
on
can
that.
you just remind us, the Community Flood Preparedness Fund, that was adopted, what, 2 years ago?
Yes.
From the RGGI program.
Well, separately, actually, the fund was established.
Fund was
before
established
Reggie.
first,
Yes.
before
Before
RGGI.
No, this, I believe, would just be specifically towards tapping into federal dollars and working as a point of contact with the Army Corps and with the,
It does? Yeah, that's what I thought.
Lisa, do you have an
Right, but
answer on that?
Mr. Chairman, the fund would now be administered by the authority with
Stand
support from
corrected.
the department.
Okay, so just, the RGGI is Regional Greenhouse Gas Emissions Fund. this money, that money would then be, I guess, would be spent by this Resilience Authority. Have I got that correct?
And Mr. Wheeler, the Coastal Flood Preparedness Fund was also designated, or the idea behind it was it would also receive federal funds through whatever source should they become available, whether it's disaster relief or just a infrastructure appropriation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, Senator Favola.
Thank you. Isn't there a provision in here where you would need a certain base level of funding guaranteed because you'll have projects started, you don't know if federal funding will always be flowing? So don't you need a baseline appropriation every year?
Well, not necessarily, because we would plan, that the authority would take a look at what has been appropriate, because usually for Army Corps projects, the funding is multi-year funding when it comes from the federal government.
Fair enough, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Favola.
But you will have staff, and you have to right, to do some of the monitoring and other
Right, that's the
activities.
$2.5 million to go to stand up the authority and
But
to
you
pay
would
for the
need that on
staff.
an ongoing basis, I guess is my point.
Yes, the $2.5
It's
million would
ongoing
be
money,
on
and I
an
just
ongoing basis.
thought that was worth noting. It's
But-
not one time.
But we believe that that would be, the amount of money that this would save the Commonwealth and in attracting new
Right.
money, it would be.
Yeah, I heard that,
Yes.
but I just want to make sure that
Right.
we know it's ongoing. Thank you.
Okay. All right, other questions from the panel? Senator Marsden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We just passed, Senate Bill 551, which deals with setting up DCRs, the agencies that will implement the master plan. And they created in that a technical assistance committee. And I assume that in Senator Kiggins's bill, it asks for DCR to provide technical assistance. And I'm just wondering if anyone has any thoughts as to whether just how it's going to flow, whether it's going to be direct communication with the Technical Assistance Committee, or whether it's going to come through DCR leadership, who has learned from the Technical Assistance Committee, because, there's just a lot of moving parts to this bill and the one that just passed, and I don't know if you exactly know the answer to that question, but there's a lot of coordination that's called for between these two bills.
There is, and this was drafted in looking at the other bills that were out there, and so it would be complementary to that legislation. It would not be, it would not contradict. It would be complementary to the legislation that was just passed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right, any other questions from the panel?
I don't want to
Senator
monopolize
Lewis.
everything. I know we've got people who want to testify to it. Can you all, either you or Senator Kiggins, explain to me how the authority, the governing body of the authority is established, comprised?
Right. Who are we talking about?
Yes, it would be the Secretary of National Historic Resources, Secretary of Transportation, the chairs of the Senate and House Agriculture Committees, 2 senators appointed by the Senate Rules, 2 delegates appointed by the Speaker, an officer of the 6 different planning district commissioners selected by the governor, and 3 non-legislative members who reside in 3 different areas of the state. And I can.
So there's no guarantee that there will be non-coastal representation on there then? There's no requirement that the representation.
There is no requirement. The 3 non-legislative members who reside in the Hampton Roads, Crater, Richmont region, Middle Peninsula, Northern Neck, or appointed by the Joint Rules Committee. So it's a geographic diversity, but there's not a requirement specifically for that.
And there, one more final question.
Senator
Mr.
Lewis.
Chairman. And there's no prioritization in there for natural infrastructure projects or anything like that? You don't even touch on that in there, is that correct?
No, there's not a prioritization for that, but we would get the advice of the authority.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Will.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Hashmi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Kagan, you may have answered this already, and maybe I wasn't following, but are we creating a redundant authority that's going to oversee the Community Flood Preparedness Fund at this point? Is this creating redundancy in what we already have in place?
Why don't we amend that? Senator Hashmi, can you restate that? We had trouble hearing you over here.
I'm sorry, I'll take off my mask.
Yep.
I'm curious, and Senator Kagan may have already answered this and I didn't follow, but my question is, are we creating a redundant authority that will oversee the Community Flood Preparedness Fund, or is this not a redundancy in terms of our kind of our bureaucratic structures that we have.
Right. I don't believe it's redundant. The group that you just mentioned doesn't really have the oversight of the entire state, and we need to take a look at the resiliency needs across the entire state. And what's very important in this authority is that we have one point to work with the federal government in order to try to marshal more federal dollars, which the other panel doesn't really have that authority.
Okay, I had a couple questions on governance that we had up here. Senator Mason, you had a question on that? Why don't you go ahead and raise that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the constant scratch and claw among chambers, the substitute says 1 member of the Senate and 3 members of the House. Ms. Walmart may have taken.
Mr. Senate,
Mr. Senate. That's what we call him up here.
Yes, ma'am. I'll raise these minute points again.
I'm just going to call you that all the time from now on. Mr. Chairman, that was actually a drafting error. It was supposed to reflect on line 45, 2 members of the Senate, and on line 46, 2 members of the House.
All right,
That's what my version says.
Ms. Walmart takes care of all. Thank you,
Okay, so on 45 and 46, it should be 2 members of the Senate and 2 members of the House. Can I get a motion to change that? Okay, a motion and second to change that to 2 members of the Senate, 2 members of the House on lines 45 and 46. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? You're not up here. Okay. All right, so we've made that amendment. Do I have any other questions from the panel? Okay, does this have to go to finance? Yes? All right. All right, report. Oh, we have a speaker, Andrea McClellan. Hello, Andrea.
Hey folks, how are you? My name is Andrea McClellan, Mr. Chair, and I come to you today as the chair of the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission. And as part of our legislative package, we asked for the creation of a statewide flood board. And after the amendments that have been presented today, the HRPDC strongly supports this bill. We think it provides that statewide coverage to address flooding. It also provides oversight to the Commonwealth Flood Protection Fund, which was just asked if this was redundant. What we saw with the CFPF is that it actually has no oversight currently, no independent oversight. It's administered by the DCR and the Secretariat, but that was something that we thought was needed, and this authority would be able to do so. It does provide in the language a prioritization for nature-based solutions. I think that's very important, and I agree with that as well. I think there's some things that need to be ironed out, as noted here, but I think this is a great move in a direction, and I think the Commonwealth needs to be prioritizing addressing flooding throughout the entire state. So we strongly support it, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to the bill.
All right. Thank you, Andrea. By the way, I should have asked, is anyone here to speak in support of the bill? Anybody in the audience? Anybody in opposition to the bill? Okay, we've had a good amount of testimony. Do I have a motion?
Move to report. Just a second.
Yep,
Can I
Senator
speak?
Lewis. Senator Lewis,
Can I speak
yes,
to it?
sir.
So here's, and I get where they're going, and I'm not saying it's not a bad place to be. But here's some concerns that I have with this at this juncture. And that is, number one, you've got a brand-new administration with appointees and some unfilled positions that directly touch on this subject area. You're setting up a whole new authority from scratch to oversee a lot of functions. As we could see from the testimony at the outset, there was some uncertainty as to what even constituted the authority, whether the Community Flood Preparedness Fund was even in there or not. And apparently, we are told that it is. We just passed a bill, Senate Bill 508, which actually shifted oversight of this fund to Soil and Water Conservation Board, which has an established infrastructure and a long history of dealing and administering those things. It's also uncertain as to what the Community Flood Preparedness Fund is going to have to administer if the administration is successful in extricating us from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, because that's where all the money's coming from for all these bold initiatives. I also have some concerns about the guarantees. We've been trying to spread all this stuff out Commonwealth-wide as opposed to the coastal focus we had beginning several years ago, and it's not clear that that does that. And I'm also afraid it may create some confusion within DCR as to what its role is going forward. And so for all those reasons, Mr. Chairman, I would move that the bill be carried over to the 2023 General Assembly session.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? Second. Okay, now that's truly a substitute. Okay, we got a motion and a second to carry it. What's that? All right, a motion and a second to carry it over. All in favor, say aye. Or actually, it's a recorded vote. Yep. I'm not gonna do that yet.
7, noes 8.
Okay, the next motion is to report this bill and refer it to finance. Yes, Senator Morrissey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, at one point, I know the James River Association, which I have a tremendous amount of regard for, opposed this. Now, maybe that the amendments have been made, they have changed their position. Is the James River Association in the virtual world that can address?
I see Anna here.
Didn't mean to put you on the
That's
spot,
all right.
but you're on the spot.
I am now on the spot. Mr. Chairman, we have not changed our position. I think we have the same concerns that Senator Lewis raised. We are very thankful of the amendment. I think it's the conversation is continuing, but we haven't changed our position on the bill at this time.
Okay.
One follow-up question.
Yes, Senator Morrissey.
James River Association has had a lengthy, multi-year involvement in the James River, the Bay. And Senator Lewis made a point about the new administration, which isn't a bad thing, but it's a factual point. Does that give you reason to pause and not show your support because it's a new administration, or is there some substantive reason that the James River Association opposes what on its face looks like good legislation?
Mr. Chairman, our position is not related to the administration of currently in place and would be overseeing this new authority. It's related to, I think, some concerns about whether the authority actually does create a surety that it's going to be a statewide authority, and a few other concerns about how all of this fits together, including DCR's role. But it is not related to the administration.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just in conclusion.
Yep.
So it does, in addressing Senator Hashmi's concern as well, it does administer that flood preparedness fund according to what I see in the legislation. And I think the bigger, at least the reason I like the bill, is that it does create just this one single entity that we can then communicate with the federal level. We're missing out on these federal dollars, and that's kind of the impetus behind this bill, is that we want to be able to capture that money, and God forbid we have some sort of a hurricane or flooding crisis. And I think just with our location and the amount of water around, in and around Virginia, I think it's really important to have that in place. So that's, again, why I just request you pass Senate Bill 569.
Okay. This bill will report and get referred to finance, so it's not going to the floor. And I think this conversation is going to continue. But I'll entertain a motion. I need a motion, folks. Oh, I apologize. Report and refer to finance. Okay. Open the roll, Eric.
Ayes 11, noes 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members
All
of the
right,
committee.
thank you. Okay, do we have any other senators that are not members of this committee with bills?
Just Senator Cosgrove.
Senator John, are you here? Cosgrove? I thought we carried that over.
Not officially.
Okay, what bill number is that?
Senate Bill 773.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to carry over Senate Bill 773. Okay, clerk, open the roll. All right.
Ayes 15, no 0.
Okay, ayes 15, no 0. That bill is carried over. That's oysters. Okay. I know we've got a lot of people here, and I think probably it's appropriate we get to the main event. And before we do that, Senator Stanley and Senator Stewart, I think you both have bills in the same code section.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, why don't you all both go up there and tell us what you got?
Mr. Chairman, I'd ask and seek a motion that this committee roll mine into Senator Stewart's and that we be made chief co-patron.
Okay, the motion is to roll
What's your bill number?
Stanley's into Stewart's, and they'd be made chief co-patrons.
820.
Do I have a second on that?
81.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay,
I think it's 81.
81 is rolled into
657. Mr.
into
Chairman.
657, so we have 657 before us.
It'll be a recorded vote on it.
Oh, we got to record, so this, open the roll, this is the vote is to record.
Can I vote from here? Can I vote from here? Can you give me voting power here? Oh, sorry, sir. That's okay. That's okay. That wasn't an important vote.
Okay, we have
You got it now?
Senate Bill 657.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, hold on one second.
Do you care what I take first?
All right, let's do this. So we've got a substitute to Senate Bill 657. Do I have a motion to adopt the substitute?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, we now have this substitute of 657 in front of us. Senator Stewart, why don't you go ahead and tell us what's going on here?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. So in the simplest form, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, what Senate Bill 657 does is it reverses the authority within the Air Board and DEQ. So currently, the Air Board is the policymaker and DEQ is the advisor. And I'm sorry, Air Board and Water Board. I didn't want to leave one out. And it would reverse that so that DEQ would be the regulatory authority and the Air Board would be the advisory body. And the reason I've done this, I will tell you all, is actually there's a little bit more to the genesis of it. When I first got elected, Tim Kaine had this in his legislative package, and I resisted it. And there are a lot of reasons I resisted this, and frankly, I was flat wrong, and Tim Kaine was exactly right. We needed to do this. I think we are one of two states in the country who still have this system of operation, but what I have seen over the years since I've been here is we now have what I would call an activist air board. And that's not what we want. There are a whole lot of reasons that we need to give this rulemaking authority to the regulatory body that has the knowledge, skill, and the scientific background to make these decisions. And that is not what we have seen. And so, to be honest with you, sometimes, and I had this discussion with the former Secretary of Natural Resources, Secretary Strickler, whom I think the world of. His boss and I were elected at the same time, and we all became good friends. And I talked to Secretary Strickler multiple times about going too far one way, and how when you do that, you don't get a good consensus, and you adopt policy that's destined to flip way too far back the other way. And I was of the opinion that we just needed to obliterate these boards altogether, quite frankly. Just get rid of them because of what I had seen. But I talked to some of my friends up there, Senator Mason, who's looking at me, and Senator Lewis and Peterson, and they moderated me on that issue, I will tell you all. And so rather than obliterating the boards, what I've proposed is just to do a role reversal within the current makeup. And so now the board would be more advisory and DEQ would actually make the decision. And DEQ has the technical expertise to make these decisions. And that's what we need to do. It brings us in line with more states within the country. And I'll tell you, it gets rid of this uncertainty for people who want to do things and that are applying for permits in Virginia, and it's just a step we need to go to. You're not going to often hear me say that Tim Kaine was right, but he was right on this one, and we should have done it 14 years ago, but we need to do it now. There are a lot of people who I think
I know there's a lot, and let me, before I get to that, I'm going to ask you a couple questions that are going to kind of tee up from my perspective. You talk about an activist board, and I've heard that. But can you give me some examples of an activist board where the board has either vetoed projects or, held up a permit, or just give me some examples
The most recent example that I paid attention to was the compressor station decision out in Pittsylvania County. And to my understanding, there was going to be no emissions within like 300 yards, and yet that board decided that that permit should be turned down despite DEQ's recommendation that it should be approved. And there were a ton of public hearings, there was a ton of evidence, but it just came down to being an activist board. And Mr. Chairman, we don't need an activist, a conservative activist board, nor do we need the other end of the spectrum. We just need certainty. We need certainty based upon science and expertise that says this permit is appropriate or it is not. Because when we have activism on either side, it hurts our state and it hurts our constituents. And so that's what this bill's trying to get to.
Okay. I assume you got people in support.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
There may be amendments from the committee, if we could take those up before people speak to it.
All right. Do you want to do that now or do you want to wait?
I think we need to hear from DEQ.
Yeah, Mike, can you come forward and give us the DEQ perspective? Mike Rolban, Director.
Thank you, Chairman and Senators. We have no position at this time, so I can't I can answer technical questions, but we do not have a position.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple.
Senator Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, sir, one of the big concerns here is rolling back the ability of public testimony. As you understand Senator Stewart's bill in the process, can we make sure that every step along the way that exists today for the public to provide comment, have DEQ respond to comment, and then have the public open in a public venue, see the comments, see the responses made by DEQ, and then respond to those comments as well?
Yeah, it's my understanding that this does not change the public comment period. Really what it's doing is it's removing some uncertainty, and it saves time. It takes 60 to 90 extra days after a permit decision is made by DEQ and a recommendation is ready for the board to schedule a board meeting. You have public notices, and they only meet every so many months. So there's no difference in the process in terms of public involvement.
Senator Favola.
Forgive me, I didn't read every detail in this bill, but is there an appeal process after the director of the department makes a decision?
Right now, there's an appeal process at Circuit Court, I believe.
It goes to the Fourth Circuit. Goes to the Fourth Circuit, does it not?
I believe so.
It depends on the specific.
Okay, can you identify yourself, please?
Angie Jenkins with the Department of Environmental Quality. Yes, sir. Some of the appeals would go to the Fourth Circuit. It depends on the particular permitting program and whether there's federal overlay or not. Some of the appeals would go to state court.
So there's no administrative appeal. It's through the
Not an
judicial
APA,
branch.
right.
I'm sorry, forgive me. These could come through an APA process.
Can you talk about the distinction? Because there's a big difference between going APA versus going to the Fourth Circuit.
My understanding is that folks can make an appeal to the director just as they would with any case decision.
With any, like a regulatory,
Okay.
like you appeal a regulatory decision. So you could appeal to the director, and if the director doesn't change his mind or her mind, you go to the court.
Okay, this is an important point, so let's be precise here. Because if you can appeal a board ruling to the director right now, then effectively his bill would be a nullity. What are we talking about?
I'm sorry, I misspoke. I believe you're right. I think the appeal would go directly to court.
It goes to the Fourth Circuit.
It could go to state court. It depends on what specific statutory provisions we're working under. Some of the appeals that folks are most familiar with go to the Fourth Circuit because they relate to
Federal law.
Federal law and
Right.
pipelines that are spanning across states.
Okay,
Most of the appeals would come to state court.
which would be the Circuit Court.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr.
Okay, any
Chair.
other questions for Mike?
Mr. Chair.
Senator Hashmi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In a minute also, I'll ask you, Senator, if you could kind of summarize the changes in the substitute? I'm just having a hard time going through all of the changes in the substitute that was just provided to us. But Senator Stewart, I was just curious, you use the term activist citizens board, review boards here, but apart from the Lambert compressor station, have we really had a lot of instances in which the review boards have taken any kind of position that would impact industry in any way or not go through the permitting process? That's the only real instance that I have. And I'm just questioning the use of the term activist. Don't we want citizens to be involved in the process and to be engaged and to be able to speak to the issues that are impacting all of us? And isn't that quite necessary as a part of the permitting process?
It is, absolutely. And I am in full support of citizen participation, and that's why this bill includes citizen participation. It keeps the boards intact, and they still have an advisory capacity, but DEQ, which is the technical agency, makes the decisions. The substitute, frankly, was just technical. I had DEQ, even though they don't have a position on the bill, look at it to make sure technically it was correct, and that's where the substitute comes in. And I don't know that any of us go through all the technical corrections in the terminology, but I can tell you that's what the bill does. I can't speak to all of these. I think that you're going to have some folks speak to them, what they've seen, but that compressor station was the most egregious. And perhaps I shouldn't use the word activist, but it is the first word that came into my mind because they completely disregarded DEQ's recommendation and they disregarded the evidence that the permit should be granted. And I think that where I came up with the word activist.
Okay, I've got Senator Lewis, and I'm going to get to Morrissey.
Mr. Chairman,
Lewis.
and really, I don't have a question, but before we open up public comment, apropos of Senator Mason's questions of DEQ, I have some concerns about continuing to make the citizen boards relevant and engaged in the process. And so I've got a couple of amendments that I think keep them in the loop or relevant in the permitting process in that they have to be reported to by the director as to any controversial permits and also with the public comment piece. So
Do you want to offer the amendments now?
I think Lisa has.
Lisa, do you want to go ahead and report those amendments? These will be known as the Lewis amendments.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Because of some late-breaking changes, I'm going to have to read these, and then I'll publish them online.
Okay.
The amendment would insert a new enactment clause number 5 after line 1040 at the end of the bill that would read that at each regular meeting of the Air Pollution Control Board and the State Water Control Board, the Director of the Department of Environmental Quality shall provide an overview and update regarding any controversial permits pending before the department that are relevant to each board. Immediately after such presentation by the director of the department, the board shall have an opportunity to respond to the director's presentation and provide commentary regarding such pending permits. Before rendering a final decision on a controversial permit, the department shall publish a summary of public comments received during the applicable public comment period and the department's responses to the same. After such publication, the department shall provide opportunity for correction by individuals who previously commented, either at a public hearing or in writing during the applicable public comment period. Such correction shall be limited to a correction of factual misstatements in the summary provided by the department. No new information will be accepted at that time. And I'll publish these on LIS.
Okay, did everybody get that?
That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, I would actually move those amendments because I think they're good amendments.
Okay.
And they help include public participation, which I do believe is very important.
Okay, all right. We have a motion and a second on the amendments. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so the amendments are now part of the underlying substitute. Why don't we do this? Morrissey, do you want to have a question, Senator Morrissey? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, for those folks that don't know your track record, it's no doubt whatsoever your commitment to the environment, particularly when I've seen in the last 24, 30 months, keeping our bay and our rivers and moving towards getting them in pristine condition. Nobody challenges that.
Thank you.
Here's my question. You seem to indicate that you, through conversations with my colleagues, fully agree that the Water Board and the Air Quality Control Board have a meaningful role. You've come to that realization. But you believe that DEQ should be the authority and those boards be the advisory. If that's your position, why didn't you do this last year or the year before? Because, I'll stop there.
Okay.
I'll stop there. Why not?
Because I've had some big fights, and I just take them on one at a
'Cause
time.
it was probably going to get vetoed.
And this year, I
that's why.
had a couple really big ones.
All right, final question. I'm always reticent to, because there's one incident that, to cause a seismic shift in our policy. And that's what this is. It's reversing Water Board and DEQ from advisory to authority and vice versa. And I understand there's the issue with the compressor station. Assuage me that just because we had this one incident, and I'll even grant you, for the sake of argument, that it was an egregious one. Why the seismic shift because of one defalcation?
Well, I think that my original thought would have been a seismic shift to blow up these boards and get rid of them entirely. I think what I have, with the help of some of my friends, I've come up with a bill that is a moderate change. And what it does is it tries to put certainty in the process. And it puts certainty in the process regardless of administrations. Because DEQ has standards that they have to operate upon. And so now people who are applying, if this passes, who are applying for a permit, know what those standards are, they know what they have to meet, and they should have some predictability as to whether or not they're going to get it. Before, it could have been a crapshoot. And that's really what I'm focused on. It's not that I'm mad at the air or water boards or anything. They serve a huge function. They absolutely serve a huge function, and I believe that we need to continue to have their participation, but we need to give the permit granting authority to the agency that has the regulations, standards, the technical ability to really make these decisions with participation from the public and the board. Does that answer your question?
It does, Mr. Chairman. One final question, if you'll allow me.
Sure, go ahead, Senator Morrissey.
What happens in 4 years from now if we were have a different administration, and I'm not being critical of anybody at all, but we have a different administration, an administration which is more activist in the DEQ arena, and you have the Water Board and Air Quality Control Board that are replete with scientists and whatnot, and they're the more structured or grounded approach. Do we switch again?
No. That's exactly what I'm trying to get away from. If you have an activist board to the right or an activist board to the left, we get away from that and we give it to the agency that has the technical expertise to make these decisions. One of the other things that's in this bill is when they make a decision, they have to give a clear and concise statement of rationale for their decision, which could then be used to appeal it if they got out of bounds. And that's really important because you don't have to do that now. The Air Board doesn't have to give a clear and concise statement of their rationale for their decision, but under this, DEQ would, which I think gives a great deal of protection to the citizens, and it helps us get away from this activism on either side, which is what I'm trying to do.
Let's, Senator Mason, then we really got to move on.
Yes, sir, really quickly, but it segues off Senator Morrissey. A minute ago, you said they would be in an advisory capacity. But really, the board would continue to set policy and have regulatory authority today, just like they do today. That does not change. It would just be the permit approval that would move.
I think that's accurate, yes. I'm sorry if I misspoke, but
No,
I believe
that's a
you're
super
correct.
important point.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, all right. Why don't we get to witnesses in support? So, Kyle, and here's what I'm going to do. Eric, if you could give 10 minutes for each side, otherwise I think we could be here all night. So 10 minutes, use your time judiciously. Kyle, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we do support the bill and how important it is for our economic development efforts. One of the big things you all are working on is having business-ready sites, and business-ready sites are not useful if you don't have that certainty that you're going to get the necessary permits. Just to clear up a couple things, right now the board does have to give a legal rationale. During that compressor station example that you heard, the rationale was 3 sentences and held us to a standard of which we are uncertain how we're going to hit it. And so the bill does add legal and scientific rationale. We want to make sure, basically, if DEQ is making the decision, they have to show their work. The other thing that you have heard is that this is the only permit that's happened. It is not. They have made extra requirements, especially at the water board of our members. And here's another quick thing about the process. To get at Senator Morrissey's point, Mr. Chairman, is that no permit submitted to the department is perfect. Every one of them that comes into the department is going to go through an extensive amendment process as it goes, and 10% of permits each year get pulled. And so you're not going to go in front of these boards with a permit that you're going to get a bad outcome. It's a waste of time and money, and that is why you don't have too many ones get rejected. The rationale for that rejection is the reason why we're bringing this. One last point I will make is the senator's right. It just absolutely does not change any of the participation requirements, hearings, all of the above. DEQ is going to have to show their work and make sure that the public has to be engaged, and that's why we support the bill.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Kyle. Edward.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Edward Mullen with Reed Smith on behalf of the Virginia Chamber of Commerce in support of the bill. I think the patron and Kyle did a great job of hitting the high points of this. I really do think that this legislation, as it now sits, strikes the right balance by keeping the citizen boards in a policy-making regulatory role, but putting them out of the permitting process and allowing the professionals and the scientists at DEQ to do that. That puts us in line with the vast majority of the other states in the country, even those that do have citizen boards, and I think there's 17 or 18 of them that have citizen boards, but they're just in the regulatory process and not in permitting.
Can you suspend the clock? And I'm going to ask Edward a quick question. Here's the question I have. Let's assume that the Pennsylvania decision was off the rails. It was not a good decision. Are there other decisions that we can point to in the last decade or so that would be similar, that would be arbitrary and capricious?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Kyle's answer to that is exactly the right one, which is the way the permitting process goes, no permit starts and stays the same throughout the process. It is amended based on feedback from the department, based on public input. If a permit gets to the end of the process, it has been vetted such that it really ought to be approved and not overturned by a citizen board. So that's why you don't have a ton of them. The bad ones are offloaded in the process, and I think Kyle's statistic was 10% a year. I can't speak to that. Perhaps the department can, but I think that stands to reason. I think and the senator, the patron, suggested this. This was an issue 15 years ago that Governor Kane took up, where there was another activist board there was the focus of some legislation at the time. Again, I think the vast majority of the permits that need to get offloaded do, and that's why you don't see that many.
All right, thanks. Restart the clock. All right, thank you. Martha.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Martha Moore, Virginia Farm Bureau. We're also speaking in support of the bill. Not to reiterate points have already been made, but just a couple of things I would like to, one, reiterate, and then two, provide another reason. Why do farmers want certainty? Part of that is because they go to Farm Credit or to other lending agencies in order to get loans for their operations, and they need that certainty. And to have a regulatory program to give them that certainty is very, very helpful. The second thing is that farmers also, if they have to go to an individual permit, that they want science to dictate those requirements, and they want some predictability with regards to it. They don't have staffs of people that can come up with different types of proffers or other things like that. They want to be a willing participant in the process, and they want that certainty going forward with regards to what the regulations, what the rules are, so that they can comply with them. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Martha. Rob.
Rob Shin with Ecotrans Midstream. Just 2 points. The first one is with the permits, there really should not be discretion. Either you hit like the national ambient air quality standards or you don't. And board members should not be substituting their personal judgments for what should be objective standards. I will say in the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a difference in what's happened at these boards. You've seen these DC-style pressure campaigns put on the board members. We had an instance where an air board member, the day before a vote, a very aggressive banner was hung on their front porch in an attempt to intimidate them. So we've seen disruptions, threats made. I mean, these boards are really getting out of hand in terms of the conduct, and I fear that just average, normal people succumb to the pressure sometimes. And there have been a couple of very close 4-3 votes that almost overturned water board decisions on the Wegmans and the Mountain Valley water permits. So I think there's just something going on in the last 3 or 4 years that is really giving rise to the need for this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Hobie.
Good afternoon. Hobie Bowen, Virginia Poultry Federation. I've dealt with DEQ for about almost 25 years now, and I certainly have not always agreed with the staff decisions, but I always felt that they were based on science. I acknowledge that they were technically based. I think this bill will improve the process without compromising environmental protection, so I hope you'll pass the bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Jim Riddell with the Virginia Cattlemen's Association, representing thousands of men and women in the cattle industry. Certainty in science is what this is all about, and you know, if we have a requirement, we will meet it. We support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Mr. Chairman, Connor Miller, representing the Virginia Grain Producers Association. For the reasons mentioned previously, we also recommend supporting the bill. Thank you.
Susan.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Susan Seward with the Virginia Forest Products Association. It may surprise some of you, but many of our lumber mills in Virginia have to have air permits.
They have to have air permits?
Yes,
Okay.
air permits, yes, sir. And any of those mills that would seek a major expansion or wanted to build a new facility that would require a new air permit, we really believe that this bill is going to provide a certainty for those folks that would wish to expand their business. So for those reasons, we really support the bill. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Corey Connors with the Virginia Forestry Association. We associate ourselves with Ms. Seward's comments, and we support the bill.
Thank you, Corey.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I have 3 minutes and 38 seconds.
Okay. You don't need to take it all, Brett.
Just 2 points. I'll associate my comments with the previous, but 2 other things. Manufacturers, we have all of these permits. We live and die by them, literally.
Sure.
There's an economic development equation here. You know, we've talked this session, many of us in the various committees, about site suitability and about site selection and with VEDP and trying to be more competitive. Companies look at Virginia differently with its regulatory system. If it is predictable, if it is reliable, if it is certain, the regulatory agency is an advantage. And I will tell you, you have a regulatory agency where, as it's been said, industry doesn't always get what it wants, but it does get a certain answer, and it's expedited. Where we're at now, it can take years to get through this process, and then you're left with millions of dollars on the table and a rejection. We can't live in that environment. It's too uncertain. So keeping the agency in charge is really key. Keeping the citizen board involved in regulation, that's absolutely important. And the other thing is, if folks are concerned about precedent, there's been a report produced by the agency on where we stand with all the other 49 states. We are a complete outlier. No state gives this kind of power to 7 people. And in the Northeast, we've been talking about Reggie states. Only Maine gives some level of authority like this. No other state does. So if you move this back to just as it has been proposed, you would be completely consistent with our competing states, put us in a better posture.
Okay. Thank you, Brett. Anyone else? Preston.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Preston Bryan on behalf of the Virginia Municipal League. VML supports this legislation as amended, especially the piece regarding site suitability, which has long been held to be local government prerogative, and this returns that to local governments, or solidifies it with local governments.
Thank you, Preston. Okay, you got $1.30 left. Do you want to just, why don't we let that, why don't we do this?
Mr. Chairman, we have a Mr. Robert Wayland.
Go ahead, Mr. Whalen.
If there's anybody else in the Zoom room who would like to speak in support, please raise your hand now. Robert Wayland, you can unmute and begin your testimony.
Okay.
I
All right,
don't
looks
believe
like
that
we're not
he's in
able
the
to
room.
access him. Okay. All right, why don't we do this? I'm going to give you a minute of rebuttal time, Richard, so why don't you hang on to that? And I know we got some opponents here, so why don't we stop the clock?
I think everybody here's for it.
Oh, sure. And why don't we get the opponents to come forward? And same thing, we're going to start the clock at 10 minutes. And to the extent you get questions from me or the panel, we're going to suspend the clock, okay? And make sure you come forward, state your name and who you represent. Go ahead, sir.
Thanks. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Patrick Fanning with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. I'm going to start by just addressing a couple of the comments and questions that were raised. Senator Mason, you asked a great question as to how can we ensure that there's still the public process that's currently available for public hearings and an opportunity for people who may be particularly affected by a permit application to have that opportunity. I would point you to line 1048, which is the second enactment clause, which deletes the public hearing provision for both air and water boards. So that's how we would address that issue. Turning to site suitability, from what I can tell on the very quick amendments that were proposed, it looks like Senator Stanley's language was put into the site suitability provisions. And just to shed some light on that process. So I'm currently a member, along with many of the other folks in this room, VEDP, industrials, localities, members of a regulatory group that are working on regulations to put some guardrails on what those site suitability provisions should mean in terms of providing certainty in the regulatory process to address those specific site suitability concerns. So you have things like safety, health, property use, whether it's an appropriate site. Yes, sir.
Okay, let me ask you that question. Please suspend the clock. I understand if you're the air control board, you're going to be worried about ambient air quality, which is going to have, particular parts per million and those type criteria. Site suitability, to me, is something that's really for the local county to decide in terms of parking, in terms of access. That's really not something for the air board to decide. Would you agree with me?
Respectfully, Senator, Mr. Chairman, I would disagree with you. So if a locality is making a zoning decision that's going to support a new air emission source, that locality is not going to be able to know the effect of that emission source on either its own citizens or on citizens in other localities that are also going to be in the airshed for those
You're talking
emissions.
about air quality. I'm talking about, for example, job generation, parking, maybe, water sewer access. In other words, the air board should be focused on air quality, correct?
They are focused on air quality.
Well, that's not
Yes,
quite my
Mr. Chair.
question. Are they solely focused on air quality, or are they also interested in other issues?
Well, that's what this provision requires them to do, is to consider those other factors like public health that
Right.
are relevant to air quality.
That's not helping your argument, but okay.
Okay.
All right.
And Mr. Chairman, may I ask Ms. Fanning?
Senator Mason.
Because Ms. Fanning and Mr. Anderson and others in our conversations about the public comment and your line 1048, that's where the Lewis Amendment comes from. Have you had the opportunity to look at the amendment to try to make sure we get that next stop of public comment and the ability to address the comments that you made?
So, yes, Mr. Chairman, Senator Mason, I did very briefly look at the language that was in the amendment. As I mentioned, it doesn't create a new opportunity for public hearing. And so with the public hearing provisions being stricken by the enactment clause number 2, I don't think that it would allow for the kind of public hearings that are currently permissible and frankly that the public should be entitled to.
Okay.
Take a look at it.
All right, why don't, do you have any other remarks?
I do.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, and I'll move on from site suitability. As I mentioned, there is the Mountain Valley Pipeline case is pending before the Fourth Circuit. We're a party to that case.
Sure.
The issue is truly that DEQ failed to comply with those statutes. It wasn't that the board was, not
I'm
listening to
not
their
here to sort of
recommendations.
litigate that.
Yes, sir.
They couldn't afford me, so, okay.
So, turning back to the substance of Senator Stewart's bill.
Yep. Eric, restart the clock, by the way, thanks. Keep going.
Thank you. So this really is about transparency and opportunity for public input. And to some of the questions that were raised previously, how many times does this happen? Is this an activist board issue? There's been one air permit denial in the last 20 years. That was the MVP denial. There's been one water board permit denial in the last 15 years, and that denial was at the request of DEQ because the permit applicant did not meet the statutory requirements. So I just want to dispel the notion that this is an activist board issue. That cannot be more inaccurate.
That's a good point. So you're 1-1 right now.
Thank
Okay.
you. I'm going to keep going. I hope I can raise that.
There's a lot of people
Yes.
behind you,
Yes,
so
sir.
if you could wrap up and we need to move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll just end by saying that, we think, we heard on the floor today, Mr. Chairman, your mention of Article 11, Section 1. We think these citizen boards are uniquely qualified to be implementing those constitutional commitments that we're making, and so we would ask that you would oppose this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the committee, I'm Shelton Miles, a cattle farmer and pastor from Campbell County, and I've come today to speak in opposition to this bill, specifically to the bill stripping the citizen environmental boards of their permitting and enforcement authority. I've had dealings with State Water Control Board since the late 80s, when I became the chairman of a riparian property owners association for 4 counties along the Stanton River in Southside Virginia. Subsequently, our people came to see the State Water Control Board as the entity who would give us a fair hearing and provide us minimal environmental protections that the DEQ on occasion had not been willing to provide. I also subsequently served as a member of several technical advisory committees, which were involved in helping regulatory processes. During those years from the late 80s through 2004, I argued cases before the board, sought relief from the board, and on one occasion, filed suit against the board. Then from 2004 to 2012, I was honored to serve as a member of the board, and from 2006 to 2012 as chairman of the board. And the last time that significant legislative changes were made affecting the boards, I was intimately involved in those deliberations and in drafting those legislative changes. So I speak from long experience when I testify to you about the value of the citizen boards and the necessity for them to have broad powers as they currently do. The boards serve as a check on the power of a large bureaucracy. They are there as protectors of both the permittees and the public. Several times in my experience, I have been a party to the board and its permitting processes offering protections or relief to a permittee that the department was not willing to grant. I've got 5 specific instances if anyone is interested. All of these instances demonstrate how our current processes, which require broad public input, with the opportunity for an empowered independent State Water Control Board to serve as a powerful corrective to bureaucracy, favorable to the interests of permittees, the public, and the environment. When the bureaucracy does not listen, both permittees and the public can appeal to the board. That appeal function, the board, where you don't need an attorney, doesn't take a lot of money, you can go and argue your case before the board, and better outcomes come when this collaborative work between the board and the staff happens. Better outcomes for the Commonwealth, committees, DEQ, and everyone. On top of that, the board's permitting and enforcement procedures provide permittees and the public a simple, low-cost way to be involved in all these matters of public interest. All the actions are done in full public view.
All right, sir, I don't want to be disrespectful, but please try and we got some good people behind you too.
When all of these things happen in the public, there are no secrets, no backroom deals. The board's insulated from political influence as well in a number of significant ways. It helps to restrict the power of any one administration, or any one political influence. And the legislature created this structure, and it's worked well over the years with just one or two blips in recent time. The work is complementary, too, as the board, in its regulatory, enforcement, and permitting action, learns as they go. So in summary, are the boards perfect? No, they are not. But if you favor openness and transparency, if you favor checks upon bureaucratic power, if you favor a division of powers, if you favor depoliticizing environmental decisions, if you favor creating a playing field where the small businessman has the same access to environmental decision makers as the state's most powerful corporations, if you favor the rule of law, then you favor retaining the authorities for these citizen boards in permitting and enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, next up. And be quick, because we got 3 minutes left.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Peter Anderson with Appalachian Voices. Mostly associate myself with the comments of Patrick Fanning, who spoke first. A couple of things that we've heard that I wanted to correct the record on. We've heard a lot in the discussion today about an egregious decision and an activist board. Some of the things that you should know, we heard the comment made about, in regards to the Lambert decision and the compressor being, no emissions within 300 yards. Well, the compressor required a permit because there are new emissions. So I first wanted to correct that. A lot of what this is about is the regulatory uncertainty that you're hearing about is because before the Lambert compressor, there was the Buckingham compressor. And so a few years ago in 2018, the State Air Pollution Control Board accepted the DEQ's recommendation and issued that permit for the now defunct Atlantic Coast Pipeline's compressor station. And the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals struck that decision down and found that the board did what DEQ asked it to do. And the court found that that decision was flawed because they didn't make a finding on that section 1307E, not just the site suitability, but the whole section of 1307E. There's a list of requirements, which you heard Patrick talk about before, that include health and safety. And so they didn't make a finding. And so what we're doing now is we're catching up. We're trying to, DEQ is doing the rulemaking, and they have got the regulatory advisory panel to figure out how to interpret 1307E and provide businesses with certainty. And B, we're in the middle of litigation on the Lambert case. So you've seen the board, maybe the board overcorrected. I don't know. I don't know what the Fourth Circuit is going to do with the Lambert appeal that MVP is appealing. But we're trying to figure out how to implement that section of law in Virginia right now. And so that's why you're seeing some of the uncertainty. The court will continue to provide new guidance, I'm sure. One other thing I wanted to correct for the record on the public comment process. I think I heard it said earlier in the first line of commenters that this does not change the public comment process. I haven't gotten a chance to really digest the amendment, but I appreciate the intent of the amendment. But what we would miss out with the bill that I've seen, the public would still miss out on the opportunity to speak to the decision maker when DEQ characterizes their comments and says, we received public comments, this is our summary. Historically, what we've been able to do is go to the board and say, well, actually, DEQ mischaracterized my comments. And then you get to say that to the final decision maker.
Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to let you guys keep going. Mike, I want to hear from you. We're going to go, let's go to an extra 5, and I'm going to give these guys a rebuttal, okay? Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Dave. It's important. Yes, please come forward. We got 5 minutes.
I'll be extremely brief. I'm Chris Tandy from Loudoun County. I want less compressor stations, less pipelines. I'm appreciative of the Air Board stopping the Lambert compressor station. I'd like to see them keep that authority.
Okay, thank you. Mike, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Mike Town, Executive Director, Virginia League of Conservation Voters. This isn't our first rodeo on this. I remember this. I think you two might be the only guys that were here back in the King William Reservoir fight. And it was the same thing. Bad decision, let's take out the boards. And you can see the people that supported this, they're all the ones who want the permits. We're the ones who want to make sure that the rules are followed. And so one thing that I want to add to the record here is that in that legislation, it changes variances. And this is really important. By changing the who does the variance, the board to the director. And the other thing that it gets back to one of those first points that was asked about like things, other site suitability. So the director will still have the ability to look at the site suitability, social cost of carbon, economic development, in deciding to make a decision to remove a regulation, but the board can't look at that stuff when it does the regulation to begin with. And so by taking that authority and giving it that variance authority to the director, that means things like RGGI, things like the Virginia Clean Economy Act, being able to do a variance for power plants to abide by those regulations now resides with the director at DEQ and not with the air board who passed those regulations to begin with. We think that's a major problem, and we urge you strongly to oppose these bills. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Anna.
Anna Killies with the James River Association. Just want to stress again, 1 air permit in 20 years, 1 water permit in 15 years at the recommendation of DEQ. We do ask you to oppose.
Good evening. My name is Tanisha Griffin. I'm the Environmental Policy Analyst in New Virginia Majority. I want to express our opposition to this bill. One of our key concerns, in addition to the site suitability criteria, wanted to make sure that the regulation case is able to fully promulgate and go through the whole process. That's one of the main concerns. But in addition to that, the communities we organize with, the Black ones, the Latinx communities, low-income communities, making sure that they have access to a full, review and thorough review that these type of decisions happen when the board makes their determinations. Also, something that I haven't really heard discussed is the potential impact to pollution exposure. So how will, now the DEQ has the ability to make these types of determinations that they haven't made before, we have serious questions and concerns about how it may impact pollution exposure going forward, as we never have seen them make these type of decision determinations. It's always after they do the draft permit and everything like that, the board gets to make them. So we have some concerns about that as well. And I provided you all with a letter, members on the committee, to kind of go deeper, and we're running out of time. So I urge you to vote no.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Narissa Turner on behalf of the Virginia Conservation Network. For all the reasons previously stated by my friends and colleagues, we strongly oppose this bill, and we urge you to vote no. Thank you.
Yep. Walton.
Walton Shepherd, NRDC. Yeah, we're opposed. This bill undoes a mode of governance here in Virginia that's been in place for decades, and it's apparently working fine. Last I checked, we're still the best place in America to do business. It seems rash to undo decades of governance based on, as best I can tell, anecdotal examples of things going awry. So I would press pause on that and vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Walton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Connor Kish with the Sierra Club Virginia chapter. I know we've only got a minute left, and I'll be very brief, but we ask you to oppose these bills. And I really want to echo the point that my colleague, Mr. Town from the League of Conservation Voters just made, and that is that all the people that came up here to support these bills want the permit. They didn't get one in the last 20 years. And it's time to start considering the people that live in these areas where the permits are being put, and that is where the citizen boards are at their finest.
Okay,
This
hold
would
on
be
a
a huge
second.
mistake.
I can't let you just make this statement. You realize that any of these businesses would require a special use permit.
Sure.
And that would have to go through the governing body.
Sure.
And they have a locally elected board of supervisors.
Sure.
So you don't think that's sufficient citizen input?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, we have several online speakers.
We got 43 seconds. We've spent a while with this. Why don't they just come on and just state their name and their position on the bill?
Robert Wayland, you may unmute and begin your testimony. Frida Cathcart, you'll be next. Frida Cathcart, you may unmute and begin your testimony. Dan Holmes, you'll be next.
Thank you. Soil and Water Conservation District Director representing Roanoke City. I reported 3 members of the DEQ staff to the Office of the Inspector General for not enforcing environmental law. Recently, the Fourth Circuit Court vacated permits that the DEQ had misled the State Water Control Board to give. And right now, Mountain Valley Pipeline is suing over the Lambert Station. I think that they'll lose that based on the evidence that I saw. Please vote against this bill and respect the citizen board members. They are volunteers as well as I, and we work really hard and take our responsibilities seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Frida.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you. My name is Dan Holmes. I represent Piedmont Environmental Council. We are opposed to the bill and would like to associate our comments with Mr. Miles. I don't think anyone said it better with regard to public process and transparency. Thank you.
David Sly, you may unmute and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm with Wild Virginia. We strongly oppose this bill. I'll tell you, it's based on more than 40 years for me of observing the Water Board. It's anything but activist or radical. They have to follow the law, and they do.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. That's from the opponents. Edward, I'm going to nominate you to do a really quick rebuttal. And I'm talking 2 minutes.
I can do less than that, Mr. Chairman. The only thing that I think, Edward Mullen with Reed Smith for the chamber.
Not 5, 2.
The only thing I'll mention is on the transparency piece. The process that the Lewis Amendment put in place mirrors the process that currently exists in terms of correcting the record and giving that feedback. It just does so to the department, which is now the decision maker. But there's also a provision that requires the department to keep the board updated as well.
Okay, question for Senator Marson.
Thank you, Mr. Mullen. It's been purported that there's only one Air Board decision that was made in the last 20 years. Is that accurate in your view?
Mr. Chairman, I can't go back through that at the moment. What I can say is, as you heard from Rob Shin and others, the last several years the dynamic has changed on the board in terms of the permits that have been called into question, but also the process is such when you're going through the DEQ permitting process, amendments are made over the course of time and bad permits are withdrawn before they get to that stage of the process. So it is not particularly surprising that there have been few actual permit denials. The fact that there are any permit denials after that degree of permitting process and amendment and refinement and all that sort of thing, and you have a permit that meets the statutory bounds according to the agency such that it's recommended for approval, to me that strikes that these things should be approved, and it really, the fact that they might not be, maybe depending on the subjective view of the citizen board, calls into question the process.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I think we beat this up for about over an hour now.
Mr. Chairman,
One question to the chair.
Senator Morrissey.
Just one question, Mr. Chair. If we do this shift where DEQ becomes the water boards become and the air quality control board become advisory, does DEQ still have to follow the regulations that's set forth in the Virginia Clean Economy Act?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
yes. And Mr. Chairman, that's the only thing I want to add. I mean, let's all be honest here. DEQ is a very tough regulatory agency. And it's not like by shifting the permitting authority to DEQ, we're just going to let everything run amok. Because that's not what DEQ does. All it does is it's now you know what the rules are. The rules are clearly set out, and if you can meet and abide by the rules, then you can get your permit. It's not going to be this guesswork based upon who they put on the board this year and taking somebody off and putting somebody on. It just provides certainty, and it provides the rules for everybody to know them, and that's really what this bill does.
Okay, I think we've heard everything, if not from everybody. So Chair will entertain a motion.
Move to report.
Okay, I've got a motion or a second to report the bill as amended.
Substitute motion?
As amended.
Substitute motion. PBI?
Oh.
All right, motion to pass the bill by indefinitely. Clerk, open the roll.
Ayes 4, noes 11.
Ayes 4, noes 11. That motion fails, so we go back to the main motion. And let me just speak, because this is a close call for me. And I think the best argument against this bill is that this may be a problem that, it's a solution in search of a problem. But I got to be honest, these are technical issues, and I've represented in front of air boards in other states, and these should be technical issues. And this bill is not done. There's going to be some, further work on it, I have a feeling. But I do think there is something here, so I'm going to vote to move this bill forward at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we have a motion and a second to report the bill as amended. Open the roll, please.
Ayes 11, noes 4.
Thank you,
Ayes
Mr.
11,
Chairman.
no 4. The bill reports as amended.
Members of the committee, so 695, it just bugged me that the General Assembly adopted emission standards that had to exceed California's. And so that's what this bill does. It repeals that statute. And I think I know where it's going. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on
Okay.
it, Mr. Chair.
I did call the governor of California, and he has promised to raise his standards, so that will no longer be a problem.
You know what? I'm going to spare you the trouble. I'm going to ask you just strike this one.
Why, we have a motion to strike the, actually, I already had a motion to PBI. Did I hear that from Senator Mason?
Strike is fine.
All right, we have a
I
motion.
know where it's going. I'm not going to waste your time.
Oh, I thought you were giving me a Valentine.
You want to vote for it? We
All
can't-
right, we have a
can't
motion to
wait.
strike the bill. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
It's on the board. I think,
Ayes
Should
10,
have voted
noes
against
5.
it, shouldn't I?
okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 532. And this takes us out of Reggie, and it repeals the authority to get into Reggie, very simply. And let me tell you why.
Okay.
And I think I know where this one's going too. But we had 3 auctions this year that netted a little less than $300 million that's going to go to resiliency or whatever you're going to do with it. Mostly it's going to go into the Hampton Roads area to deal with flooding. I do have a way to backfill this, by the way. He's not here, but Stanley's Gray Games. That'll cover all this money.
Yeah,
We could
okay.
take care of it with that. But here's my issue with this. This amounts to an arbitrary tax placed upon the ratepayers, the citizens of Virginia, and you get absolutely no benefit of stopping pollution. So the caps or the credits that they sold did not, in one instance, cap the amount of emissions going into the air. And it won't next year, and it won't next year, and it won't next year, and the next year. But they say sometime in the future that it may. But practically speaking, each and every one of you all know in this room that when we need power, we're going to get power. And there's no way we're going to cap these emissions, even though this is a cap and trade program. But what we will do is we'll continue to arbitrarily tax the ratepayers and increase the cost of electricity. Now, we've had bills in the past 2 years where the companies can't turn off people's electricity because they can't pay it. But yet this increases the cost. I'm told, and I'm not an authority on this, that the auctions we had this year alone will increase the cost of electricity to the ratepayers by up to 3%. May not be significant to us, but it's significant to some people out there. And that continues year after year. If you look at the fiscal impact statement on this bill, what it costs Virginia, $95 million, $85 million, and $5.5 million. So that's roughly $190 million a year until 2029. Now, $190 million a year is a lot of money that the state of Virginia is going to lose through this program. But $190 million a year is an awful lot to arbitrarily tax the ratepayers, the citizens of Virginia, for no pollution benefit whatsoever, particularly in a time when inflation is out of control. So I don't think I got the votes on this one, but my conscience made me bring this bill, because if we need to find money to help people in Norfolk, I'm all about that, in the Hampton Roads area. But it's just simply wrong to tax Virginians when you're not even getting any pollution benefit
Okay, all
from
right.
it. All right, that's all I'm gonna say. I
Preach
promise.
on, preacher. Okay, all right.
Almost there.
All right, here's what we're going to do. If you're in favor, I'm going to give 2 minutes to this bill because I think we all know where we are on this. I'll get 2 minutes to supporters. So any supporters, you got 2 minutes, line up.
Mr.
well,
Chairman.
Wow, okay. All right, why don't we do this? Opponents, you don't even need to speak, just stand up. Opponents to this bill, to the Reggie bill.
Less than I thought.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, you do
All
have
right.
one speaker in support on Zoom.
Okay, go ahead. Brent Hunsinger, please speak. Go ahead.
I thought Openshane was gonna speak for it anyway.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Speaker, we actually oppose this bill. Thank
Story of my life.
All right, all right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I'll entertain a motion.
I will move to pass this one by indefinite.
Story
Okay.
of my life.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to PBI. Clerk, please open the roll.
Ayes 8, no 7.
Shocked. Okay, all right, 8-7.
That was closer than I thought, too.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I have Senate Bill 567, and I'm going to try to be really brief on this. This is a serious bill. And so I represent the western part of Prince William County, and there's a subdivision out there that has, I think it's 24 homes and like an executive golf course that's been in existence for many years out there. They've got a spray irrigation field for their sewer system. That has failed. They have been paying for multiple years now pump and haul, which is extraordinarily expensive, yes, for this system. And the only way they can discharge under the standards that we require today is through this bill. I have gotten technical assistance from DEQ. I have been assured that this does meet the standards that would be required. Mr. Chairman, I move the substitute. Shucks.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to adopt the substitute.
You can vote for one of my bills.
Okay. All in favor of adopting the substitute, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, all right, so we have the substitute in front of us, at least metaphorically.
And so that's what it does. It allows this community to continue and live without paying for pump and haul through a discharge permit, which I believe, because I requested to make sure that it's would be discharging effluent that meets today's standards. But DEQ is here and they'll help me with that.
Okay, Mike, do you have a comment on this?
We have no position at this time on the bill, but technically, the senator is correct. It meets today's standards. The issue is in the Occoquan watershed, and there's a current policy against any new discharges. But it's a real community problem. And I happen to, full disclosure, I live near there. I don't use that system.
Okay.
But I know the area, it's been a problem for a decade or more in our area.
Okay, so this, you said it's Western Prince William, what, like Nokesville? Where are we talking about?
It's between Nokesville, well, it's Bristow. It's
Bristow, okay.
Yeah, you know where the Harris Theater is at the corner of Linton Hall and Route 28?
Yeah, of course.
Right,
Okay.
just down the street.
All right. Okay, any questions for the patron? Do we have anyone who's in support or opposed?
If you were in the Zoom room and would like to speak on this bill, please raise your hand.
Okay, all right.
I can
Chair-
make a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Chair will entertain a motion.
I move that we report the bill.
We report the bill. Why does it have to go to finance? What?
Does it?
Oh, forget it. Okay, but report and refer to finance, that's the motion. Clerk, open the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the.
Thank you, Richard. Okay. Okay, do we have any more bills left on the docket, Lisa, or are we done? Oh, Linwood has two. Oh, yeah, okay, I'm sorry to keep you waiting. Senator Lewis.
So you know what's going on. I know it. Somebody gives me a job.
Mr. Chairman, I've got some folks here who have expressed an interest in Senate Bill 500, so I'd ask that we consider that one first.
Yes, sir, please.
And I'm-
Senator Lewis, 500.
And I believe, Lisa, there's an amendment for this one. If somebody could help me with a motion on the amendment.
And second.
Motion and second to adopt the amendment. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, we have the amendment. Is someone, Lisa, are you going to report that?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
On line 45, after affiliated, insert comma, unless the commission finds, based on evidence in the record, that the debt-to-equity ratio of the actual end-of-test period capital structure of such utility is unreasonable, in which case the commission may utilize a debt-to-equity ratio that it finds to be reasonable.
And Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this came to me from the folks at the Poverty Law Center who had some concerns about the consumer protection aspects of this legislation, and so I shared that with them, and they think that that addresses their concerns. And so there's, I guess you would say, peace in the valley. Never heard that before around here on that one. And so we want to bring, I'm also glad to bring this up because this is going to put you to sleep at 4:30 in the afternoon because this is about waterworks, as I call it. They laugh when I call it waterworks, but that's what it is. And really, it's about encouraging investment, particularly in rural areas who find themselves in positions where they want to divest themselves of their water works and sell it or give it over to private industry. And so that's what this is designed to facilitate. And it's designed to facilitate by addressing a somewhat Byzantine capitalization requirement that the SCC follows with these types of things in setting in capitalization versus how they set their rates and the rate of return. And I'm going to let somebody else speak to that because, as I said, that is mind-numbing.
Okay, do you have an expert witness?
Yes.
Okay.
We've got
bring 'em
several
forward.
people here, I think.
Who do we got?
Barry.
Okay, Stuart's telling me this is a really good bill, so. Okay,
See?
all right. Just make it brief.
Thank you, Senator Lewis. Barry Suits, Virginia American Water.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, committee, I
Sure.
appreciate the time. We support this bill. This bill will help provide the much-needed revenue or capital investments for water and sewer systems in the Commonwealth. It really just asks that we look at the investments made in Virginia, not those made outside of Virginia and other states and other locales that don't impact Virginia specifically. In the last year or so, several smaller communities have come to people in our industry, not just us, but the water and wastewater industry, which is small. Private system is small in Virginia. And predominantly, the issues are investments in their system and access to resources. And that's what this bill will help
Okay,
provide.
let me just cut to the chase. We've had a long day. Is everyone standing up a supporter? Are there any opponents at this point?
Move to report.
Okay, that's going to be a self-evident. Okay, move to motion. I have a motion and a second to report. Clerk, open the roll.
Ayes 14, noes 1.
Okay. 14 to Suderline. Okay. All right, next bill.
Finally, Mr. Chairman, I have Senate Bill 499. And I believe there's a substitute on this one, is it, Lisa? Yeah.
499.
Don't have that? Okay. I will tell you, Mr. Chairman, that actually, I'm sorry. Let me see. The substitute that we envisioned for 499 looks exactly like House Bill 774, which is an amendment in substitute by Delegate Hodges. It mirrors that language exactly. And so I don't know how the chairman wants to handle this. You want me to?
Okay, can you just tell us what 499 does, just so we?
Sure. This bill is about solar projects and the life cycle of them and a study to examine what happens at the end of the cycle with these things. What is their lifespan 30 years from now? The potential impacts of the life cycle on farming, forestry, and sensitive wetlands, but also
Lisa, did you have an issue?
Not an issue. I was just going to
sorry,
let you
Linwood.
know that because the substitute is in the ether somewhere, this bill does have to go to Senate Finance. So
Okay.
if you want to report it, I can, or you're well, if you're going to report it and send it there, I can get the.
Okay, why don't you just tell us what it does, Linwood?
But I think the real difference between the bill as introduced and the substitute, which would be the House version, is there's a paragraph 4, I believe, that it also now considers potential beneficial economic impact of solar, wind, and battery storage development, in addition to the downstream costs. So what it looks at with the analysis is supposed to assess the feasibility, cost, recycling, and salvage opportunities, waste strategies, and liability for decommissioning, and the potential impacts of underground infrastructure post-decommissioning. So it's looking at what happens at the end of the life cycle of these huge projects. We've got, I forget how many acres, it's a huge number of acres out there, 97 square miles, of utility-scale solar now in service, and more online. So that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, well, I'm just curious, what's the life cycle? You put up a solar facility, we talking 20 years?
30
or
years, I think,
30
is
years?
the general, isn't it?
And that's the depreciation schedule
Yeah.
typically also?
And it's important, too, because a bond has to be posted
Right.
at the outset of these things for
All right.
decommissioning, so.
Okay, is there a budget amendment in for this?
That's a good question. I can't remember whether we put a budget. It's a section 1 bill. So
Okay,
it's a-
all right.
Yeah.
Is there anyone opposed to this? Joe, did you have something you wanted?
Just one quick question. Linwood?
Okay, Morrissey has a question.
Linwood?
Yes, Senator Joe.
When you talk about analyzing the life cycle of the facility, can you just succinctly tell me
Well-
what you mean by the facility of
Yeah.
that renewable energy facility?
And probably the life cycle is probably not the best way to phrase it, but in other words, what happens at the end of the useful life of these solar farms, essentially, and now I think battery storage is covered by this too, when they reach the end of their useful life.
Okay. And then after you analyze it, report it back to the chairman and the governor? Is that it?
And then we have a better sense, cost-benefit analysis to the locality, but also, again, the important thing is the decommissioning process, what you have to do at the front end to make sure you're covered 20, 25, 30 years at the end when the thing reaches its useful, and that's the recycling part. Can they be recycled? What it does to landfills, that type of thing.
Correct.
Okay, Joe, do you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, just a clarity, and my apologies to the patron and the committee. So the difference between the substitute and the bill that's before you, the substitute that the House reported out of committee is it changes the entity bringing together and doing the report. It's now the State Corporation Commission.
Okay, all right.
And so there should be no fizz then to the state at that
All right,
point.
that is a change.
Yep.
And Joe, you represent
I'm sorry, Joe Lurch, Virginia Association of Counties.
VACO,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, motion to report and refer to finance, and I have a second.
Does it have to go to finance if the state
Does it?
corporation
Yes,
commission?
clerk, open the roll.
I
Well,
thought
but
Joe said
even
it
if it's
didn't.
non-general funds.
Ayes 15. Ayes 15, no zero.
Okay, ayes 15,
Thank you,
no
Mr.
zero.
Chairman.
Linwood, you're done. Do we have any other bills? Suitorline? And Emmett, you got one? Okay. Okay.
And then we just have Hanger. Oh, and Marsden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 146 provides that no establishment that only sells prepared food shall be required to have a certified food protection manager on site during all hours of operation. This bill came to me I've heard from several restaurateurs since, but initially the very first conversation was with the owner of Texas Tavern in Roanoke, which operates 24 hours a day, 364 a year.
Okay.
Senator Edwards and myself frequent it, so do our U.S. senators when they're in town. It's a local
All
landmark
right,
in
let me
Roanoke.
just stop you here. Is there anyone opposed to this bill?
I've not met them yet,
Okay,
but
All right.
this is the time I often do.
okay, well, all right, if anyone here is to oppose this bill, step forward. Otherwise, I don't see what the problem is. Is that?
What?
No.
No,
No,
no
it doesn't.
finance.
They've asked for it.
Oh,
What? But there's no fiscal impact.
what would the fiscal impact be?
I can't imagine one, but it says impact statement next to it unless I'm looking at it wrong. Maybe it says no fiscal impact.
It says no fiscal impact.
All right, you know what, let's report and refer to the, report and refer to the state senate. Okay, what do you think of that? Okay, all right. We got a motion to report and report. There we go. Over the roll, please. All right. Good work. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, 15-0. Is that the only bill?
That's it.
Okay.
Senator
Emmett.
Hanger and Senator Marsden. Senator Marsden only has one bill.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have
you're amazing.
two bills dealing with nutrient credits. The first one, Senate Bill 187, will require, I think it's a substitute or amendment, yes, substitute, it looks like being passed out there. What this will do, Mr. Chairman, is allow the Department of Environmental Quality to accelerate the release of nutrient credits generated by stream restoration projects. And then it defines certain things that would apply to a qualified applicant so that you could accelerate the release of nutrient credits. And that's the reason for the substitute. There had been some concern in the original bill that it was too limited in who could apply to have these accelerated nutrient credits. There's an issue there where there are not enough credits to go around currently, and if we can accelerate the release, that's a good thing, so long as they're secured adequately, and we're comfortable with that. So I would ask you to adopt the substitute.
Motion to adopt the substitute is made and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Substitute is adopted.
Mr. Chairman, the reason for the substitute hit pretty close home to me in that one of the first, if not the first, person to develop one of these stream restoration projects for nutrient credits was a farmer from Mount Solon. And he called me up, and also the company that put in place the nutrient credit restoration of the stream there was the grandson of my ag teacher in high school. And he lives here in Richmond, so it hit pretty close to home. So I think with the substitute, all is good in terms of what would have potentially been some people that would have been opposed to this. That's it. Shannon Varner is here. If there are technical questions you'd like addressed, he's the expert on these nutrient credits.
Shannon, are you here? I am, yes. Just speak very briefly.
Sure. Shannon Varner, I represent the nutrient bankers, Resource Environmental Solutions, Davy Resource Group, a number of those that have asked the senator to come forward with this bill and work closely with his good friend right down the mountain to correct some of the concerns with the bill and all the other parties. So we support it. Yes, thank you, Chairman and fellow senators. DEQ's position and the administration's position is to support this. It's an ongoing problem, and actually, this just does what we already do for stream mitigation projects. So we do the same thing physical on the ground. One's for 404 program. This is for the nutrient program. Nothing changes what we do. We're allowed to do this on the other program, so it makes sense.
Okay. Does anyone oppose this bill? Get out of your silence. All right. Chair will entertain a motion.
Second.
Motion and second to report the bill. Eric, open the roll, please.
Senator Hanger.
Yeah, I'm in favor of that.
Ayes 15-0.
Okay, 15-0. What else you got, Emmett?
Senate Bill 188, which deals with the long-term management fund for stream restoration nutrient credits. And what this does is create an authority to allow long-term stewards, more people to be able to do that. It allows DEQ the authority to, and the specific provisions of the bill are on the second page if you want to look at that, if you're into reading bills. Currently, it's very limited in terms of a long-term management fund, a financial assurance mechanism that's established. The language of this bill would allow the DEQ to approve a third-party holder to hold these funds that are held. They are interest-bearing, and they're there for security for the funding streams for these nutrient credits.
Give me an example of a third-party steward. Would this be like an escrow account at a bank? I mean, who are we talking about?
Essentially, and there's some of them listed there that DEQ could approve as Shannon.
Shannon, go ahead. Yeah. Illuminate.
Mr. Chairman, for these stream nutrient credit programs, there are a number of funds that are put in place. One of them is for long-term management after all the construction and the credits are sold. The applicant needs to come up with a long-term management plan
DEQ proves a long-term steward as the entity that then oversees that, but we have also put up a fund to fund those activities. Currently, the only available mechanism is a trust account held in a financial institution. Those cost anywhere from $2,500 to $5,000 or more a year, eats away at the principal, and defeats the purpose of having those funds. So again, we're trying to do what we do over in the 404 wetland program, like Mike mentioned, is do the same thing we do over there and allow these third-party, approved third-party stewards to.
DEQ, do you have a position on this?
Yeah, our position is that we support this as well. It brings it in conformity to what we already do on 404 program banks.
Okay, all right. All right, same thing as before. Is there anyone in opposition to this bill? All right.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if you're ready for a motion.
I am ready for a motion.
Okay,
Senator
I move
Hall.
that we report the bill.
Okay, I got a motion, a second to report the bill. Eric, open the roll, please.
Ayes 15, no zero.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Okay, anybody else? Do we have any other bills? One other bill.
Marston, his tree bill.
Oh, tree conservation.
Don't you like trees?
I like trees. Speaking of trees.
Yeah, speaking of which.
I know. We've been pretty harsh on the trees today.
Came back right there.
All right. Okay, we have a substitute being distributed. Do I have a motion to adopt the substitute? Okay, motion and a second to adopt the substitute. All in favor, say aye. Okay. The substitute is adopted. Senator Marsden, go ahead and start describing this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has been an ongoing process, and Peace in the Valley was just acquired a short time ago. Today, I just got the talking points. They read a little bit like stereo instructions, but I do have some help here from the Bay Foundation to put this out. But the substitute deletes all changes proposed in the introduced bill. In lieu of those proposals, the substitute adds 2 new code sections. The reasons for adding the new sections are to ensure that all localities with existing tree programs may continue with clear and accessible statutory support, to offer new options for other localities, and to make this bill consistent with the House. The original bill back in the day had meant to sort of accelerate the tree replacement that you had during urban construction. To replace it for the purposes of dealing with heat zones and things like that. And so that's the first thing that it does. The substitute includes many of the same elements as are existing in 52.961 and 52.961.1, but it adds new elements. The substitute, like the original, authorizes local tree programs to require developers to ensure that that their project will achieve tree canopies at 20 years at least, as large as the percentages specified in the code. For example, in sites developed for commercial use, the locality may require 10% of the developed site to be covered by a tree canopy within 20 years. That percentage may be achieved through tree planting or conservation. To clarify what percentage canopy requirements applies to mixed-use developments, the substitute provides a new definition of mixed-use developments for which the canopy requirements will be the percentage applicable to the predominant use of the development site. If y'all are following this, good luck to you. The substitute allows for a small 10% increase in required tree canopy achieved through tree preservation under the 2 circumstances, in 2 circumstances. Where the locality and developer agree on a reduction in local development standards, i.e. parking lots, setbacks, et cetera, where 20% or more of the land area of the subdivision or development is within an enhanced tree canopy area. The substitute carries over the option of certain deviations from the overall canopy requirements, but adds a new provision clarifying that neither forestry nor forestry activity are prohibited. The substitute provides greater clarity on when a developer may use off-site options to meet its tree canopy goal. This was one of my big deals here, is that you could off-site the mitigation in another place, kind of like banking. And what it provides, though, is tree banks and tree funds may be used to meet this requirement through off-site planting or preservation, but within the locality of the development and as near as feasible to the development site. If there is no bank with sufficient tree canopy credits within the locality of the development,
the unmet portion of the canopy requirements may be met through a tree bank located in an underserved community or through a tree fund that directs tree planting in an underserved community, provided the locality where the project is located. Underserved community is defined as an area that was historically redlined. An area subject to an urban heat island effect is defined by the locality where the bank is located, and an area composed of low-income census blocks. Last thing, in enactment clause, the substitute asks the state forester, working with a stakeholder group, with promulgating guidelines for determining achievement of tree canopies. I want to thank the home builders and primarily and Peggy Sanner from the Bay Foundation for working on this bill, and now they can explain what I have just inarticulately
so you want to
laid
thank the
before you.
Academy. Okay, all right. Peggy, come forward. Can someone just tell me in a sentence or two what we're doing here?
Sure.
What's the actual change to the
Okay,
code?
so existing law allows Northern Virginia localities in Plan District 8 and Chesapeake Bay localities, using the other statute, to have certain local tree programs. Why should the rest of the state not have the option? These are not requirements. Localities should be able to, and this substitute allows all localities across Virginia to adopt a tree program if they wish. What's a tree program? It enables the locality, working with developers, to require a certain percentage of tree canopy to be achieved at the end of the road, i.e. 20 years from now. The quantity is set depending upon the kind of locality it is. Is it commercial? Is it residential? Is it mixed use? And so forth. This also expands a small amount, by 10%, the size of the resulting canopy. If the locality agrees, we're going to maybe relax setback requirements or other local requirements. It also allows a greater canopy, 10%, if what we're talking about is a development in an area that has, for example, a lot of trees on it already, defined in the bill. If it's got RPA that takes up at least 20%, if it's got non-isolated wetlands that take up 20%. So in other words, it gives localities more flexibility to add trees in specific circumstances. I would just point out that this is a bill that results from last year's bill, which Senator Morrison introduced. You all approved it on a provisional basis, subject to a stakeholder process and resubmission. This was a pretty hard-fought, politely, but hard among all of us. We think it certainly grants some additional environmental benefits. I understand that our development colleagues think that it grants more flexibility where they need it. I also understand that folks from the ag community have no objection to this. So it is very much a consensus bill on an issue that's plagued, all of us, especially you all, for a long time. So happy for questions.
Well, it reads like the book of Leviticus, but other than
That's
that.
a good thing, right? Excuse me,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Senator Stewart.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In trying to read through this substitute quickly, if I understand this correctly, you get around lines 93, and it talks about the county shall require a plan for any subdivision, blah, blah, blah. 10% of tree canopy for a site zone, business, commercial, or industrial. So if you're developing a solar farm, you got to put 10% tree canopy back into that solar farm? Is that what this would say?
So first I would note that those percentages as applied to those categories of development are already in existing code. Two provisions in Title 15.2. So this is not new. Do you want the site?
I believe that.
Okay, so we've carried over that.
It seems to me counterintuitive if you're trying to develop a solar farm, you put trees in it.
This doesn't require new trees except in the context of development. And what it does is just requires at the end of the development a certain percentage of trees as accepted by the locality will exist. It's entirely voluntary. The locality doesn't have to sign up for this program at all.
Okay, why don't we, do you have any support? I think we can make this quick. Are there any supporters? Let me ask you, is there anyone opposed? I know this has been a lot of people involved. Is anyone opposed to this bill at this point?
Mr. Chairman, we have 2 speakers online who I believe are in support.
Okay, we don't need to hear from them because I think we got the gist of it. And I think we're ready to take a motion, Senator Mason.
I just have one quick question.
Okay, one quick question, I got a comment, but go
Line
ahead.
2627, however, the city of Williamsburg may require 10 years, the minimum, since you call out the city of
Well,
Williamsburg,
They're already on a different, they're already
you
exempted.
just tell me what we're doing.
It's already in the code. It's
Yeah.
been in the code forever. Just carried it
Good
forward.
question, Chuck.
Oh, come on, guys.
Quick question.
All right, Senator Morrissey.
Dave, Senator Marston, would you please briefly address that portion of the bill that allows for the invalidation of local ordinances? If I remember last year, you couldn't do that, local ordinances that were adopted pre-1990, but now you can?
That is true last year. It's part of the compromise that we have this year, and I would ask,
Mr. Chairman, Andrew Clark with the Home Builders Association. If I'm understanding the question correctly, this substitute would not invalidate any existing ordinance. So the reason why we put it into two separate code sections was to allow localities the option to continue their current authority under 961 or 961.1, or they could adopt statutes under these two new. So if you've got it and you like it, you can stay there, or if you want to go to this new one, you can go to the.
Senator Favola.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to be clear, though. Localities can only adopt an ordinance that applies to developments that are coming forward for site plan approval or variances. This does not apply to anything by right. That's the question. I don't see the opportunity for an ordinance to address any by right projects in this bill,
I
but
don't think it could.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, to answer your question, this kicks in for any application for site plan or
Right.
subdivision.
so it's correct, yeah, okay.
Right. Okay, I think the short answer is a lot of this is existing law, correct? And I think one of the challenges is going to be for you, I trust you guys, but somewhere within this building, there's another political body that may not have that same trust. And so you just, if there's a way you can make this simple. Okay? All right. Having said that, let's entertain a motion. Okay, I have a motion, a second to report the bill. Eric, please open the roll. Joe?
Ayes 10, noes 5.
Okay. Okay, 10 to 5, the bill reports. Okay, I think that's our business. Do we have any other bills we need to address before crossover? Lisa says no. I just want to thank our staff. We have gotten so much work done. And we will see you on the other side. Okay.